We are blessed today to have retired Brigadier General Catherine E. Roberts, retired from the United States Air Force in 2009, as our speaker. She retired as the Director of Signals Intelligence System Acquisition, National Reconnaissance Office, Office of the Secretary of the Air Force for Space in Chantilly, Virginia. General Roberts entered the Air Force in 1977 through the ROTC program at Indiana University, where she was a distinguished graduate. Her assignments included space operations, acquisition of space systems, and staffing. Okay. She was a manned spaceflight engineer, the program manager of a major acquisition program group, stood up a material wing, and has served as on the staffs of Major Command and Unified Command Headquarters, Joint Staff, and Office of the Secretary of Defense. That's a mouthful, too. General Roberts served as the Vice Director of Operations at U.S. Space Command and the Vice Director of Space Operations at U.S. Strategic Command for the run-up of execution Operation Iraqi Freedom. General Roberts also has served as the Commander, Command and Control Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance Systems Wing at Hanscom Air Force Base in Massachusetts. She retired from the Air Force as Brigadier General and has remained active in the aerospace community and operates her own business. She lives in Lacey now. Just moved down from Seattle, right? So this is going to be a fun program, an interesting program. General Roberts, you want to come up and...
As your dreaded after lunch speaker, I have to say that my most important words are, I will keep this short. Fundamentally, I can sum up my career in the question, how far can you see? And for me, that's an important question because it touches on the limitations that we put on ourselves and the limitations that we put on other people. How far you can see depends on where you're looking. At your feet, at the horizon, somewhere in between. But it's fundamentally centered around what you personally believe is possible. If you don't believe it's possible, you're not going down that path. So, for me, the most important folks that helped establish for me what is possible were my parents. That's not always true for everybody, but that was the most significant influence in a world where women could not. You heard a lot, women could not. Oh, you can't do that because women can't. I was told coming out of high school, you can't go to Indiana University. We've never had a graduate from our high school go to Indiana University and succeed. So you can't possibly do that. And, oh, you want a physics degree? Really? When you listen to those voices, you do what Eleanor Roosevelt spoke about. But she said, people do not have power over you unless you let them. You have to listen to that and internalize it. I was fortunate. My parents basically said, if you work your tail off, you can pretty much do anything. That was good enough for me. So I was off and running. I did physics instead of engineering because in the 1970s, engineering schools weren't necessarily as welcoming to women as they are today. And I found an interesting thing. Coming out of high school, I met the men's entrance requirement to be a freshman engineering student. I did not meet the women's entrance requirement. The guys did not need as high a GPA as the women did. And I have a word for all the people who were in the academic community at the time. That is not where you go to get your MRS. You're not going to engineering school. So for your MRS. But it was an interesting time. So I was off and running on physics. At Indiana University, three things came together. And it was interesting because I was looking for a scholarship. I needed some help to cover college costs. And I got a letter in the mail. And it wafted a 2-year scholarship potential in front of me. Because 3 things came together. I needed the scholarship. The Air Force needed physics majors. And the third one was they decided for the very first time to offer 2-year ROTC scholarships to women. Cool. I was in. For 4 years, that's the payback. I could do anything. So, great. I'll do this. It was pretty humorous at the time because they really weren't sure what to do with the women. And we were the first group of women that went through ROTC summer camp. And they kind of sequestered us. It was like, these are strange carbon life forms. We're it was pretty funny. So I got into the service to tell you how much the service was prepared for all of this. I took the oath as an officer and a gentleman. What God couldn't do, Congress did. So we were squared away. It was an interesting time of change in the United States culture as well as in the military itself. In 1976, they opened up the Air Force Academy to women. I was offered, because I was on an ROTC scholarship, I was offered the opportunity to go. I asked the most important question I could think of. Now, I am a science nerd. I'm sometimes oblivious to things, and I was oblivious to the fact that being in the first class to have women might be a difficult challenge. The most important question I had, do I go as a freshman or do I go as a senior? Because I was a senior, and they went, you go as a freshman. Wrong answer! So the Air Force Academy went on its way. There was a first class of women. They graduated in 1980. That's when some of the major changes and major opportunities began to open up to women. Because prior to that, women were not allowed in what we call the rated career fields. They were not allowed in the cockpit. So they couldn't be pilots. The women auxiliary service pilots in World War II were never officially in the military, and they've been trying to work through that and the implications and ramifications of that ever since. But in this case, they opened up transports to women. So they could be pilots, they could be navigators, they could be engineers, flight engineers on board. That was a first. In 1983, they opened up the missile career field, so women could be missileists. They didn't open up fighters until the 1990s. But the other thing that happened in the 1980s that proved pivotal for me, they told the government, told the Department of Defense, you have to put as many of your satellites on the space shuttle as possible. At that point, the Manned Spaceflight Engineering Program was stood up. That was the Payload Specialist Program for the Department of Defense. Those of us who became manned spaceflight engineers were not ever assigned to NASA. It was somewhat of a shotgun marriage. NASA wasn't real thrilled with having to deal with the Department of Defense, and the feeling was mutual. And we say they had a strange and wonderful relationship. NASA thought the military was strange, and the DoD thought launching their own vehicles on their own launch systems was wonderful. So it was an interesting time. But we were the interface. So we helped make sure that crew procedures were developed, that the mechanical and electrical interfaces were established correctly. The mission profiles were set up, and we also trained as payload specialists. And for me, I was living the dream. I was working in space, both manned and unmanned, i.e. the satellites. It was great. The training also produced some very interesting experiences because, again, there were only 2 women in the program, and Maureen and I are not particularly tall and not particularly broad, and that made for some fun times. One of the things that we had to do was we had to become scuba qualified in order to go do work in the neutral buoyancy tank. The scuba qualification involved going down to the Navy dive school in San Diego. Now, by that time, there had been 2 women Navy divers, and that was it. So we were the next group in, and those of us who were the manned spaceflight engineers, it was really pretty funny because they're used to having the guys training for underwater demolitions and for the SEAL teams and this kind of stuff. Those guys go, I'll do 500 push-ups. Do not make me take your test. We were all engineers. So we'll say, we'll take any test you want us to take. Don't make us do 500 push-ups. So it was very humorous. And then you train first in the pool. You can't wear a wetsuit because the chlorine chews up the wetsuits. So what are we diving with and learning how to handle? Twin steel tanks. They weigh 75 pounds. You have no buoyancy because you have no wetsuit. I weighed 125 pounds. When we went off the high dive, practicing pier entries, you're holding your regulator and your mask, you're holding your tanks, you step off the high dive, and I went rocketing straight to the bottom of the pool. It's just boom, and back up. And they're looking at us like, you guys are just useless. It was really pretty fun. There was some interesting experiences with that. But that led to an interesting experience in the neutral buoyancy tank. Because I don't know if you're familiar with the neutral buoyancy tank. It's a big kind of swimming pool tank down in Houston. It's about 30 feet deep. They have a full-scale shuttle mock-up of the shuttle bay in it. And that's where you go practice and develop crew procedures for work that had to go on in spacesuits in the shuttle bay, either because it was planned or there had been a failure that required it. So the space shuttle suits are modular. We were not in the modular, we were the Department of Defense guys, so we got the old Apollo suits. Apollo suits were custom made for the Apollo astronauts. They didn't have a lot of adjustment capability. So off we go. They put me in the suit, pump it up, because it has to be pressurized, and you walk down the steps to get into the pool. You get about knee deep. You take the next step, and your feet shoot out from under you, and you're now looking at the ceiling, going, I don't know how I'm going to move. And you don't. You just float there like a barrel. And the safety diver comes over and grabs the toe of one of your boots and drags you to the middle of the tank. And then they have stitched pockets on the shoulders, your chest, your back, and your legs. And they start adding weights. Because they want to get you to 15 feet and make you neutrally buoyant there. Because that's the height of the cargo bay. So that way you can practice your procedures and do the development work. So they jam all the weights in, and they get you down to 15 feet. And then they start a process that is the Raggedy Andy, Raggedy Ann process. They grab you and they shake you. And then they let go. Because they want to see if you list. Because they have to make you neutrally buoyant. You don't want to be constantly fighting a turn. They put you in every direction and do this and shift weights around, and then they also turn you upside down. That's when I, at my all stunning 5'6" height, fell into the helmet. Because the suit is neutrally buoyant, but unless the suit fits, you are not. And so, into the helmet, I shall not repeat what I said over an open mic. And then they flip you back up. Well, so you get to fall into the bottom half of the suit at that point. It was really pretty funny because this was, after it got pumped up, the suit was incredibly large on me. I could put one hand in one glove, one hand in the other glove, but not both hands in both gloves at the same time. This made doing any work in the water useless because I wasn't going to be able to do it. It was really pretty funny. It was, in fact, straight out of Comedy Central for about 2 hours. And needless to say, it was the last time that I ever did that. I got to be on the comm center, and they put a bigger person in the suit who got to go out and do that kind of work. It was it just, the understanding of what it meant having people of different sizes in the program, especially women who have a tendency to be smaller, was really funny. Going in for a lot of things, it went that way. So as we went through the Manned Space Flight Engineering program and developed all the work that was needed to be done, and we had some very successful Department of Defense flights, and then Challenger happened. And I was scheduled to fly, but it was a flight after Challenger. And the Air Force made some decisions when the Challenger accident occurred that basically ended my opportunity to fly. But it was sure fun trying. So I went off and stayed in space, was still able to work on Department of Defense satellites, and satellites that were critical to the defense of the nation and for our allies. And it was in those ensuing years that I learned something that I consider hugely important. We often attach values to jobs that don't apply. So when you talk to people and say, well, what do you want to do? And you hear it from little kids all the time. I want to be a fireman, I want to be a policeman, a lawyer, a doctor, whatever it is, I want to be that. And lest you think that that's only a little kid's question, think about one of the staple questions in a job interview. So tell me, what do you want to be, or where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? The job, though, in my observation, is not the primary goal and should never be the primary goal. What carried me through all of these jobs after being a manned spaceflight engineer and kind of living the dream was an acknowledgement that the job was the means to the end, not the end in itself. We pick jobs because we unconsciously think those jobs are going to scratch important itches for us. They're going to satisfy some intangibles. The intangibles are the things that keep the fire in your belly going when cruddy days turn into cruddy weeks, turn into cruddy months. And we've all been through those. So what are those intangibles? For me, number one, make a difference. Number two, create and build something that will make a difference. Those were the most important things to me. And I was very fortunate. I was able to have a career where I was able to do pretty much just that. There were a couple times where I was going, this is a stretch, but it worked. The importance of that is that when you look through your very personal lens, because these are individual needs, and when you have a lens and you look through that, jobs that you might have been fascinated with prior to that don't look so appealing. On the other hand, there might be a whole lot of jobs that you've never considered before that look very appealing. So I encourage everybody to think about what is it that lights your fire and keeps you going. What are you passionate about? And use that as your personal lens when you're looking at various opportunities. Because it's amazing how many people don't apply to things. There were 1,000 people that applied to the Manned Spaceflight Engineering program. There were 14 in my cadre. That probably would have been 4,000 people, except 3,000 people self-eliminated. They said, I'll never be accepted. Self-elimination is the competition in a hurry. So I encourage everybody, if you're interested in it, go after it. There's a great quote from Goethe that kind of sums it all up. And that is, whatever you can do, whatever you can dream of doing, begin it. Because boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. And it comes back to, what do you believe is possible? How see. And on that cheery note, being mindful of your time, I will take questions. Sure.
Thank you for this wonderful talk and for the inspiration that you are and have been, I know, to women. I have a daughter who is waiting to hear, she's finishing her master's, waiting to hear whether she's been accepted to Air Force Officers Training School. And I would like to know, what piece of advice should I share with her from you? I would like to tell her something.
For OTS. There are a variety of things that actually go through my mind, but probably the most important thing is perspective. Because when you go through OTS or ROTC or you're at the Air Force Academy, their intent is to break some habits and instill in you some core values and some ways of going about things. They are going to do stuff just to irritate the heck out of you, and you're going to think, this is just rules for rules' sake. This is all Mickey Mouse. Remember their intent and learn as much as you can.
General, could you tell us a little bit about your experience with the space program, some interesting things that you were engaged with and that went on?
Limited. But I can tell you that one thing is that we did on a particular program, you have to decide, do you really trust your engineering or not? Yeah. Which is an interesting question when everything's on the line. Like,
Push the button. Don't
we
push
were working on a satellite that had not been built before, trying to do something that hadn't been done before. And the heart and soul of one of the major pieces of gear refused to pass qualification test. I mean, we did everything. We worked for an extended length of time trying to get that thing to work. It finally worked. And we went, ha, success, great. And the tech at the contractor, why he did this, no one knows. He wasn't really sure. But instead of taking the pedigree package of all the test data and the box and strapping it on a cart and dragging the cart to the next spot, he put the paperwork and the box under his arm. And of course, Murphy's Law, right? He's walking by an open stairwell and the box rolls down the stairs. We can't build another. We don't have time. It's hugely expensive. And we're going, now what? So we all looked at each other and the decision was made to take the engineering model, which was pretty much flight-like, instrument the heck out of it with accelerometers and impact meters, and have the same guy walk by the stairwell and push it out so it rolled down the stairs again. We rolled it down the stairs 10 times and then graphed it out. It was all below the qualification levels that the original box had passed, and we went, okay, let's turn it on. If it works, we're going to fly it. and we did. We turned it on, ran it through tests. It worked great. We flew it, and it worked on orbit for over a decade. It worked really well. But do you believe your engineering? I'll tell you what, there was some pucker time going on. So, yeah, it's always nice to have margin.
2 questions. What countries do you see will be the leaders in space exploration over the next couple of decades? And also, what type of vehicles are going to be going up in space? You know, we're seeing these rockets, like SpaceX landing rockets, and it seems like that's more important than shuttles and things.
Well, the shuttle's been decommissioned, so we're done with that. And that was partly due to the expense of maintaining them. They were the best of late 1960s technology. They had been upgraded some, but not a tremendous amount. In terms of I'll try to take those in order. In terms of the nations that are going to be moving out in the space arena, it depends on whether you're talking manned and unmanned. And I'm not sure on the unmanned side that it will be a nation state. Because with the advent of the microsatellites and the nanosatellites, which are the really small ones. I mean, we've got satellites that are thousands of pounds, and we've got satellites that weigh 2 pounds. I think it belongs to the commercial world and to people who are willing to try. In terms of manned spaceflight, going to the moon, going to Mars, I think the Chinese are going to be quite the challenge to us. They take, and their culture leads them to take a much longer view than we do. I mean, let me rephrase it. You get an insight into the Chinese culture when you go back to a comment that Deng Xiaoping made back in the 80s. He was asked about what he thought of the French Revolution, because it was the 200th anniversary of the French Revolution. And he thought about it and he said, it's too early to tell. That tells you a lot about the Chinese philosophy. So I think right now they're going through the process of duplicating things that we have done, that the Russians have done, but they're not too far from going off and doing their own thing. And so I think they're going to present quite a challenge to us. Whether or not the United States remains a player depends on the choices we make. One of the things that hurt China many, many years ago, they had an international deep sea fleet. And it's written down and documented. They found these records that back in about 1000 or so CE, they decided that they were too expensive to maintain, and they burned their fleet. So when people got back to China from the West, they had a coastal fleet, and that's all they had. They made that choice. We have choices to make. The one thing that we will have to do is have people be prepared to look for new business cases. Because the satellite industry is a fairly mature environment. To my mind, we treat space a lot like a national park, right? What do you do in a national park? You take pictures. We do that. You have cell towers that look like trees, and so you can do communications. We do that. We have communication satellites. They have fire towers to watch for forest fires. We have missile warning satellites and things that look for dangerous things. We have people, we have tourists, you know. They go up and work, but it's still fun when they're there for a while and they leave. Those are mature business areas. We need to really look at what are the business cases. And some people are doing that. You know, Bigelow has his inflatable habitats. He launched 2 in the 2006-2008 timeframe. One was a quarter-scale mock-up, one was a half-scale mock-up. And they've been collecting data ever since on inflatable habitats, which is really very cool. There are a variety of others that are off exploring things we're looking at. They put a 3D printer up on the International Space Station recently because they're looking at how microgravity impacts 3D printers and your ability to print parts in space instead of having to launch them. It's a lot easier to launch commodities than it is to launch electronic and mechanical gear that has to survive the launch environment, which is incredibly harsh.
We have time for one more, so make it a good one.
Well, my question is, what brought you to Lacey? Why did you select Lacey as coming here? You had the entire nation to go through with all your experiences and assignments. What brought you to make Lacey your home, and why did you establish a business here?
Actually, we started in West Seattle. I retired from the East Coast, from the Northern Virginia area. And years ago, my husband, who I had met in the service, fell apart. His warranty expired, and he's built with all bad parts. So medically, we had some challenges. And I made him a promise that when I was done with the blue suit business, that he got first choice. Because while we were in the service, neither one of us were really going to get much of a choice. In fact, I asked once, I said, does my answer to this question matter? And they went, well, no. I said, why did you ask? So he had talked about Seattle for years. Had never been there, didn't know anybody, didn't have work there. It was a leap of faith, but he really wanted to go there. So we packed up, bought a house, and moved. Coming to Lacey, followed on the, he had some medical issues, some additional information that we got last year. And we said, we need to think about things long term. And so we wound up moving into Panorama. And I set up my business in West Seattle and then just brought it down with me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for an interesting presentation. Things have changed over time. And, you know, it's interesting. I don't know when our club allowed women to come in. Ken, you would remember what?
86.
1986 or 87, right in that range. So
Who said 87?
I think things have changed.
First woman Rotary.
Things have changed for the. You notice only the guys blabbing here. You know, so it's changed for the better with the women here. So
Well, do about that.
across the board. Thank you very much. We have. We do a lot of things in this club, build trails, and we support a lot of local organizations. And one of those is the South Sound Reading Foundation, who donates and gives books to kids. And what we do is, on behalf of the speaker, have you sign your name on a book, and we donate that to the South Sound Reading Foundation. And I picked out a book yesterday. It's called Mission Space. It fits pretty well. It's a cool book, lots of neat stuff in it that you would like. So if you would sign your name to this, we will donate it to behalf. Thank you very much again. Appreciate it. Please give her another round of applause.